So we're joined by Ross Brodar, the man behind the film, The Lynchpin of Bensonhurst. I believe if you go to DominickMontiglio.org, you can get the link there, which will take you to Vimeo. You could either rent or purchase the film. And I suggest you do because I enjoyed it. It was a beautiful documentary and it's put out by Xenon Pictures. Is that the distribution company, Ross?
Yep.
Okay, Xenon Pictures. All right. So everybody go to DominickMontiglio.org, click the link there. That'll take you to Vimeo. So before we talk about Dom, I just want to know a little bit about you, your background, where you're originally from. I know you're an artist as well.
Sure. Yeah. I grew up in Long Island. I grew up right on the border of Queens and Nassau County, Great Neck, Little Neck area, right there. I sort of got into a bunch of trouble as a kid, and I ended up getting kicked out of school on Long Island, and I ended up going to a school in Manhattan, which I ended up graduating high school and from like a sort of special school in Manhattan. So I left home at about 16. I was institutionalized in it for a little bit. I was like I said, I got into a lot of trouble, so I ended up in in a situation trying to avoid going to jail. I ended up in like a therapeutic community where I stood for almost 3 years in Manhattan, and that is actually where I found art.
Okay.
I was an athlete as a kid, but I was stuck in this place, and they had like an art therapist guy there, and I got into art through being in that scenario.
Interesting. I'm from North Queens, actually. So
Okay. So
yeah, so I know the area.
Yeah, you know where I'm from.
Yeah, I know exactly where you're from, man. Yeah. All right. So I gotta ask you, growing up in that area, I mean, do you mind if I ask you how old you are?
No problem. I'm 50 years old.
Okay, so growing up at that time, you're in Great Neck. Did you travel into Bayside, Flushing a lot?
Oh yeah.
So were you influenced by any graffiti at all at that time? You know, the Clearview Expressway, anything that was going on with that, or you were kind of outside that?
Yeah, what TMR stuff that was
Yeah,
going
yeah.
on? Yeah,
TMR,
absolutely.
RAS.
Yeah, all that stuff. And the Long Island Railroad, all this stuff
Right.
going back and forth from the city. Sure.
Okay.
I mean, that was like right where I grew up, and it was funny because, how does a Jewish kid from Long Island end up living with Dominick Montiglio is kind of a funny story, right?
Yeah.
That area at that time, you had Cardoza right across the way. I went to Great Neck South. That's the school I ended up getting kicked out of, was Great Neck South.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, it was, at that time you had like the border of Queens, you had a lot of like Italians, Irish, Jewish.
Yeah.
That was like the mix, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And Black, Latino, whatever, but that was like the concentration,
Cool, man.
So.
Yeah. So I'm younger, but yeah, I guess we have a similar, growing up in the same area. That's kind of cool.
Yeah.
So getting to Dominic, so when was the first time you met Dominic, and can you talk about like the circumstances around that meeting and maybe your first impressions of Dominic at that time?
Yeah, sure. I ended up meeting Dominic through a guy that became a very good friend of mine, Richie Emilo. He grew up with Dom. Dom was actually Richie's best man at Richie's wedding. Richie was the manager of an Italian restaurant called Barolo, which was in Soho. It's on West Broadway. Big Italian restaurant. It was very famous back in those days, in the 90s. I bartended over there. So Richie and I got to know each other, and he told me one night he was going down to Tribeca to an art show. His buddy Peter Weiss had a gallery, and his buddy Dominic was going to be showing his work. And he just told me Dom was a colorful character that he grew up with, that he thought I'd find his work interesting. And, if I got to know Dom, I'd hear about it. But he didn't really get into it. He just told me, he just put it out there like that. So, of course, I go down there. Dom is there. He's dressed in a fucking suit, hair slicked back. He's got these very interesting kind of expressionist paintings. And he was singing doo-wop in the basement with these guys, having drinks and stuff. And I looked at his work with Richie, and then I went up to him and I was like, yeah, man, very interesting stuff. It's very cool, whatever. He just looked me dead in the eye. He goes, it's all shits and giggles. And then he just kept it moving. And that was my first interaction, shits and giggles, which is one of his expressions actually that I'd get to know.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was like the first night. And then, you know, Richie and I were hanging out with Dominic, and yeah, Ross lives in Sunset Park. No shit, I'm living in Sunset Park. So Dom was living in Sunset Park for that period of time. And he had a girlfriend. He lived up on 6th Avenue on 56th Street. I lived on 39th Street off of 3rd. So, you know, I said, yeah, you know, if you want to come by the studio sometime, I had the whole top of a warehouse down there. And Dom started coming around. I started going to his place, started drinking some beers or whatever. And he started telling me stories. And to be honest with you, I didn't really know whether to believe this shit or not in the beginning, because it sounded so out there. And I was kind of like, how the fuck are you on the street if this is your reality? What are you doing in Brooklyn? You know, I didn't really know what to believe. But funny enough, I go uptown to get tattooed by my friend B, rest in peace. And B was a tattoo artist from the Bronx. And I'm telling him the story, and he pulls Murder Machine off of his shelf. And he goes, is this the guy you're talking about? I'm like, that's the guy.
Wow.
So that's how I kind of like got to know, okay, who I'm dealing with, what his story was. And I began to take him a little more seriously at that point.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Yeah.
Okay. So you kind of realized the magnitude of who he was. Did you read Murder Machine at that point? Did you get into it?
I didn't really read it. I skimmed through it, but just skimming through it while I was getting tattooed and like then going and doing a little research, I realized who he was. And then talking to Richie, like, you didn't tell me, you know, well, I don't tell you, I don't tell everybody about that. So I understood. And yeah, then I got that, but then I was intrigued and I was like, wow, this is interesting. And then of course, because I'm an artist, I'm looking at his work and I'm seeing like the story behind the story, the symbolism. And that was like, that's what got me like, all right, what's this guy about? You know?
Yeah, that was actually my next question. I was going to ask you when you kind of realized, well, you know, this guy's got a knack for this. Like, he's got some interesting stuff to put on the canvas or paper. Like, did it take you a while, or when you saw it, you were like, wow, this is...
Oh, no, it was immediate. I was like, because he's self-taught like me. I didn't go to school for it. He didn't go to school for it. He's just doing it. So when somebody comes to art that way, it's always a little bit more unique because there's no preconceived ideas of what to do. This is just naturally coming out. And it was really telling his story, his life story, the symbolism, Coney Island, the gangsters, you know, Brooklyn, baseball, football, whatever, you know, New York, subways. You were getting the vibe, right, of what this was about. So immediately I was kind of fascinated, and I was just getting into that outsider art world, that self-taught art world myself. So I kind of really understood the value of what was going on. And then, you know, he comes to me one day and goes, listen, Rossi, I can't stand living with this chick. She's driving me nuts. We're not getting along. We're fighting all the time. It's like, you know, can I come crash at your place for a few weeks until I figure out where I'm going to go? And I was like, yeah, come on over. So during that time, now we're doing marathon sessions of, you know, hanging out and drinking and smoking and bullshitting and getting into it. And as the weeks progressed, I realized he didn't have a fucking plan. He didn't know where he was going to go. He didn't really have a place to go.
Right.
Plus, he's living off, at that point, he didn't get 100% from the government for his VA stuff yet. He was still fighting for more money. He only had a little bit of money. So we concocted a plan, which basically was like, look, I'll let you stay here. You live here and make art. You tell me your story. You give me your story like nobody's given it before. Like you spill your guts to me and we do this thing, right? Now at the time, there was other people that wanted his life rights, that wanted to make his story into a movie, a dramatic movie, a theatrical movie, whatever. And he was like, you know, Rossi, I got all these people, but I'm leaning toward doing it with you, you know? And I was like, what? You know, that's a big responsibility for me. I had never made a documentary before, but he just believed in me and thought I could do it. I, of course, thought I could do it too. And so it was kind of this exchange of like, you know, you're gonna live here. I'll take care of the rent. You're gonna give me the life rights. We're gonna make your movie. And it started almost like a business arrangement, but then the friendship began to grow over time. And he really started disclosing his life in a way that I realized was really unique.
Right.
And he started making art that was really unique. So there we went down the rabbit hole.
Great. Yeah, because I know that he said in an interview, I believe, that even in Murder Machine, you know, he said they left a lot of shit out of that book. That he said, I recall him saying that, so I'm sure he had a lot to say.
Yeah.
If you don't mind, I just want to show some of Dom's stuff. That's cool with you?
Yeah.
I'm just gonna, let's see. So I have so we'll start with this right here. Can you see that?
Nope. I can't see anything. You trying to share the screen?
Yeah, right there.
Oh yeah, there you go. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that, I love that, man. That reminds me of I don't know, kind of like, well, did Dom have a favorite artist, by the way? Can you speak on that?
Well, so here's what's interesting. He didn't really in the beginning like know shit about art, man. You know, he was just doing his stuff. And I had some art books laying around the studio. And one day he's like coming out of the bathroom and he's like has this book in his hand of surrealism.
Okay.
And he's like, Rossi, you know, look at this Salvador Dali. And the other one was Yves Tanguy, who was
Yeah.
I believe a French artist. And it was all this surrealism. And he's like, this is the shit I like, man. Like this is the direction I want to go in. So I think that book really influenced him at a certain point in time. But if you look at this painting, you could see all these faces. You could
Yeah, I
see
do.
guys with
Yeah.
hats and glasses and capes and kind of like that was the development of the gangster motifs that he was working with.
Right.
He'd always throw stuff like Prime is in there, Calo 30. He'd have numbers, everything correlated to something, whether it was the fucking setting on a scope in Vietnam,
Okay.
whether it was a place somewhere, right? Whether it was
Yeah.
a hangout, whatever it was, like Dom knew how to decode this shit. I could decode some of it, but you know, he would always be like, yeah, Calo 30 was this, and that. Like he knew what he was talking about in these things. And he would use a knife
Yeah.
to like make these impressions, and he'd use brushes to kind of like feather it out. So yeah, he was developing his own style at this time. And he made this at my house.
It's beautiful, man. I got another one here. I'm gonna bring up also, let's see. Second. Forgive me.
It's all good.
All right. Okay. Okay, you see that one?
Absolutely. Yep.
That I love, man. That's all those squares, all those images within each one. It's like almost like it's like a collage almost, but painted.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, I have a painting like this too that you might have seen in another interview that I did.
Yeah.
I put this one behind me today, but yes, so he did a series of these called patchwork paintings. And what he'd do is he'd work on all these patches individually. He'd be there cutting the canvas, priming the canvas, laying them all out. Then he would make the images and he would slowly start to like put them together on the canvas. He made about 5 or 6 of these paintings.
Wow.
And like he had themes, like you see the piano player kind of figure in the middle.
Yes, yeah, with the red pants.
Right? Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So he would have that character. He would have like this dark crow thing, or always the hat gangster guys with like mustaches and stuff all the time. Mm-hmm. And then he asked me to do some work on this painting. So you see on the right-hand side, all that kind of symbolism stuff.
Yep.
Yeah, that's me.
Wow.
So I would work. So he'd be like, Rossi, I want you to like put some of your symbols and shit on my painting. I'm all right. So we did a bunch of shit like that together, where like we did collaborative work. I've actually got a couple collaborative pieces of Dominic and mine, where we'd work on one painting together in the studio.
Wow.
But yeah, this is the type of stuff he was doing. It's just amazing. The light that he did in it. He'd had these like figures going towards the sun. Like if you see at the bottom right area, there's
Yep. Yep.
you know, death, life and death, gangsters.
Yeah, man.
You know,
Yeah, he definitely knew how to bring light into this.
Shit. It was dark, man.
Yeah. Speaking of bringing like light in, this is another drawing that you sent me, which was this one right here. And I love how it's just like that little light, that little, I guess is that a gun? That's like a little flash there.
Yeah, exactly. Like a muzzle.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I love that, man. So that's
brilliant.
Is this like a memory, or is this just general, you know?
Yeah, no, these are memories, man. These are memories. Like he, you know, all this stuff was coming from his memories or his subconscious things that he'd seen or been around, you know?
Yeah, man.
So that one's heavy, man. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, man, I love it. And I'm just gonna do one more if you don't mind.
Oh, go ahead.
Another one which kind of has it's got a bunch of here. So we got 6 different boxes here.
Okay, so the story behind this is that at the time, right, my buddy B, who was tattooing me, who also tattooed Dominic quite a bit, tattooed him at my house a bunch of times. There's one online with a bunch of friends from uptown, and he's getting tattooed a werewolf on his belly and shit. B had said, "Hey, Dom, why don't you make some tattoo flash?" And Dominic had never made tattoo flash. So this was Dominic's attempt at tattoo flash, right? Wow. I actually have a tattoo on my ankle of a gangster. Let me see if I can show it to you. That Dominic did. It's down here.
Oh, yeah.
See it?
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So Dom made this tattoo flash stuff up, and I have the original pages. And then I did like some close-ups, which I showed you. But that was his thing, man. It was like when he made these, I was like, holy fuck, dude. Like you could make a cartoon or I don't know what out of like, you know, you could just the stories, man. Just like they're amazing. So the detail, the delicacy that he did it with, it states the obvious, right? These guys are all gangsters.
And Mike Bello, is that somebody in particular? Mike Bello?
Must have been,
yeah.
I mean,
okay. Yeah, these are great. I love it. They're
just great. And Dom, like the top right one with the little city, that's like Dom. That's like his self-portrait, like the city and the stash and the hat and stuff. He would always do that.
And these drawings are pencil or charcoal, or
these are all pencil drawings?
All pencil.
Yeah. Everything I just said to you is pencil. And keep in mind, like I was telling you earlier, before we started the show, I've got like 20 drawings, and that's it.
Yeah.
Like it's amazing. Now it's like it's a rarity. I've just got like this finite group of drawings that he left with me. I've got a couple paintings, like the one in the back. It's hard to see over there.
I could see that, yeah.
It's still got like those type of figures in it, the hooded figures, and you know, death is going on and all kinds of dark shit. This guy's walking a fucking succubus or something. Like, yeah, you know, the time. He always put time in there. And that's also like a surrealist image as well, like Dolly with the melting clocks and stuff. So so he was influenced in that direction for sure. But all his art was very cryptic, man. And again, like that's what spurred the documentary was like, as he was telling me about the art, he was telling me about his life. As he was telling these stories, what happened was I have a buddy, Billy Sharp, who I used to bartend with we used to work at a place called Jerry's down in Soho when I was in my early 20s. And he was like, Ross, how are you not filming this shit? Like, what was going? That's what, you know, he was like, you got to film this guy. And that's when I was like, Dom, what do you say? You know, we make a movie. He was like, let's do it. You know, he's like, he never told his story outside the things you read or were documented in his, you know, court stuff, right? And everybody that did like Nat Geo or Discovery with Kurt Sutter and all those guys, they always asked him the same shit.
Right.
And he always told them the same stories. But in my film, I wanted to dive into how did he grow up? What was his family like? What was Nino like? What was it like being around the DeMeo crew? You know, what were your relationships with those guys like? How did it affect you? And all those things.
Yeah.
As you know, like Dom had a different type of soul. He was dark, but he wasn't like these guys. There was a difference between him and them. They didn't have that like inner artist thing going on. Could have been a musician, a painter. Like they were killers, and they were killers of like a different magnitude than Dominic.
Yeah. Yeah. I definitely picked up on that, over the years, like looking into the crew. I always viewed him as a sympathetic character. I kind of always saw like that he was kind of dragged into all the shit, all the stuff with his uncle, kind of getting turned down all his interests, whether it be, music or anything like that, or sports or whatever. It kind of seemed that he was always dragged in another direction. That's at least what I could see. So if you don't mind, I would like to talk a little bit about his time in Vietnam, specifically after Vietnam. How do you think Dominic carried that through his life? Vietnam, what he saw there, what he experienced, and not only how he carried his personal experience, but once he became a public figure, you had all the false valor stuff, you had all the naysayers, you had all that stuff. So I guess, how did he handle his own experience, and then how was he handling the experience of dealing with that stuff? Did that equally affect him? Was it, if you could talk about that?
Great question. So, Dominic, as you know, he wasn't just in the war. He was a war hero.
Yeah.
He did heroic shit. It's documented online. There's articles about him. It's in our film. The guys that were in Nam with him are in our film. And funny, when I met Dom, the overall view I had of him was much more of a broken down war vet who had been a gangster than a gangster who had like been in the witness protection program and fucked up his life with all that shit. Like I saw a much broader picture of who this guy was. And when I would talk to him about it, I'd be like, how many years were you actually a gangster and doing all that shit versus like growing up, going to Vietnam, and then afterwards WITSEC, and then, until I met him, he had a much broader life than just that moment of time, right?
Mm-hmm.
So Vietnam was his fucking identity, man. I mean, Dominic was on Hill 875. Dom was in a fight where they fixed the bayonets and went, back to back, and were fucking bayoneting the shit out of each other at the end, killing each other hand to hand, washing in blood, going through body parts to pick out their buddies that had just been obliterated. He was one out of not many guys that came off a mountain where the fucking bloodshed, the decimation was one of the worst in the war, right? And so he was haunted by that. He had survivor guilt. He had PTSD. He told lots of Vietnam stories. And, he was proud to have gone there. And he was fucking pissed to no end and disgusted that this fucking guy had written that stolen ballad book. Now, I, as his friend, once we became friends, took it upon myself. I went after that guy. I mean, I was trying to find this guy. I got a lawyer. I was trying to sue this guy. Verity Press was the name of the press that I couldn't find this guy, couldn't get to him. He didn't have all the info, right? Dom's records were sealed. He couldn't find Dom's records, so he just threw Dom in and said he wasn't in Vietnam and called him, lumped him in with all these other stolen valor guys that he couldn't find.
Yeah.
And here's a guy that I'm taking to the VA in Brooklyn to get shrapnel taken out of his fucking arm because it's surfacing. When I met him, he had, like, you could see in my film, when you first started seeing me film, he had 4 teeth in his head.
Yeah.
His teeth were all fucked up and falling out. He went to the VA when he was staying with me in Brooklyn and got his teeth. He's getting checks sent to my house. You understand? He was in the fucking war, right? I'm meeting his boys that he was in the war with. We're going to the Vietnam parade. We're going to a bar and meeting the guys that I'm talking to them on the phone. He was there. So I'm like personally going, and people are online. Yeah, he's a liar. He was full of shit.
Even today, even still, I see it.
Even still.
Even still.
It's amazing to me, man. And I'll tell you, like, I would say a good 60% of my intention is to clear that guy's name that he was there. Like, I come from a family where my father was a Marine, my uncle was in the Navy. They joined up, Vietnam happened. And my uncle, I'm not sure what he saw or didn't see. My dad didn't see action, but he was a Marine and he went and did the whole thing, didn't get called up. Dom did tours. Dom killed people out there. I mean, you see pictures of me, he's holding fucking Vietnamese.
Yeah.
He was in hunter killer teams. I spoke to the guys. He was a great man. He figured out all kinds of ambushes. And I mean, the guy was slick, man. And he was fucking heroic. And he was a soldier. He was brave. He bled for our country, Yeah. So people would be like, he's a fucking, because when I started hanging with him, why are you hanging with this guy? He's a rat. He's a this, he's a that.
Oh, man.
And I'd be like, listen, first of all, you're not in the mob. I'm not in the mob. So for me, he's not a rat because I'm not in that world with him, right? He didn't rat on people. I don't, these guys, it's like another life that happened 35 years before I met him. I'm meeting an artist and a broken down war vet who had been a gangster. It wasn't for me to pass judgment on this man or say, well, you did this stuff in the street. I'm gonna hold to some code of the streets that I wasn't involved in. So that was my answer to most people, and still is today. Like, what he did with them, that's between them and him.
Yeah.
I can understand those guys that got locked up, and there was a lot of people that testified when guys went away, not just Dom, but of course they hate his guts, and rightfully so. I'm sure if I was in their position, I'd feel the same way, right? But in the end, the man was the greater picture, right? And Vietnam, again, like I said, this was his identity. This was what he related to more than anything. This is where this is where his fucking demons were from too, man. Like the streets, definitely. But Vietnam, his knees were all fucked up from being a paratrooper. He couldn't walk good. Like I said, he was having shrapnel that was still coming to the surface in his body. He got shot out there in Vietnam. He lost a lot of friends out there. Guy was a fucking warrior, man.
Yeah, I'm so glad you said that too about the whole people obsessing over the rat stuff, because I don't know if there's like this whole economy of like people on YouTube, whatever, they're just obsessed with talking about people who ratted. They have no connection to the mafia. They have never been in that life. Something is compelling them to just constantly, as if they have some skin in the game. And I'm like, I feel like who am I to pass judgment on somebody for things they did? And if you really want to simplify it, at the end of the day, I mean, most of the time you're talking about murderers ratting on other murderers. So like, what are you trying to talk about? Like, it's something that perplexes me as far as people, passing judgment on individual character, and, you're not in that person's shoes. So you really shouldn't. I mean, of course, do whatever you want, but,
Well, you know what I think it does, man, Brett? It gives them a feeling that they got street cred.
Yeah.
Right? Because they tie themselves to some type of morality that they think upholds some shit that they're not, like you said, but they don't have no skin in the game. They're not invested enough to take that stance and say, well, this guy's a rat. I don't have nothing to do with him. If you were a gangster, rolled with him or you were involved, that's different, right? And also to your point, let's be real, man. You take guys like Sammy, right? Who would have never ratted if John didn't fucking throw him under the bus, right? And hear him on those recorded tapes and tried to play him the way he played him. What's Sammy gonna fucking go away and ruin his whole life because this guy wants to, have him sit in jail for his shit? Right. Dominick's uncle was trying to whack him. Was Dominick gonna say, okay, I'm gonna, get killed because my uncle's paranoid, or my uncle's pissed that I didn't listen to him and doesn't like the shit I've been doing, I'm going to leave my wife and kids behind? They tried. They had their shot. They missed. They weren't able to get him. If they were, he'd have been dead. So these guys flip. They're in a life of treachery of double crossing, right? They guys read Machiavelli. All Machiavelli is about is double crossing each other.
That's
So
it.
the whole fucking system, like that was the one interesting thing, and I'm glad you bring it up, that Dominic showed me was that the mafia and the mob itself was intrinsically fucked from its inception because it was born into the philosophy of we're all good right until it's between me and you. And then it's dog eat dog, even with your brother, your captain, your fucking whatever the fuck you're involved in, your relationship. They always end up fucking each other one way or the other.
That's it.
That's it. And you could just go down the line of all the guys that do it. It's human nature. And the end of the day, you're sitting in a box. Very few guys are going to be like, yeah, I'm going to sit in this box forever because I want these knuckleheads out there who don't give a fuck about me to, think that I'm a stand-up guy.
Right. Yeah. Us as civilians, we're supposed to be like, oh, that's a stand-up guy. That's a real man. He's in a hole. I'm supposed to like, that's a good shit. I don't get it,
Right.
And so I don't comment on it. I'm interested in the history and that's it. Sammy's talking history on YouTube. I'm there to listen.
Yeah.
I'm not interested in his personal life. So, and that's, before we move on from Vietnam, I just have one more thing to ask you. Guys that come out of situations like that, it can go a couple of different ways. It could be, I can't believe I went to war, fuck the government, or this whole shit is corrupt. I'm done with this country. Or, they could stay patriots for the rest of their life. They could be patriot. Where do you think Dom falls in? Was he a patriot?
150% patriot.
Okay, awesome. Yeah.
If you watch Lynchpin of Bensonhurst, he talks about being in Berkeley where they tried to burn a flag in front of him.
Yeah.
He goes, Rossi, I went through that fucking crowd like a hot knife through butter.
Yeah.
And fucked up a bunch of people up. He's like, you don't burn my flag in front of me. My boys died for that flag. I bled for that flag. To the day he died, man, that guy always patriot. He never once was like, the war was fucked up. I'm like, never once. He believed in what he did. He did what he had to do. And he had the utmost, highest level, man, of honor and patriotism, for our country.
Yeah. Okay.
People,
good to know, man.
And let me throw that out. People that listen to this that think he wasn't there, you're a fucking idiot and you don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Straight
I mean,
up.
watch the movie. Yeah. Watch the film.
Meet the guys that were in the mud with him.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, man. That's all you got to say, man. Watch the film and you'll see it. So you decide you're going to make the film. I guess you had some issues at first. I tried to watch it and I thought there was something wrong with my iTunes for a minute, but I guess you had some distribution issues and it got shelved for a little bit.
Oh man, we ran into these fucking scumbags from California. They had a company called Distribber, and they were supposed to be aggregators. They're supposed to be the middleman that bring your product to a platform. They got us on iTunes, and now it's funny and serendipitous, right? Because we didn't actually have Mike Cavanaugh and Uncle Ben, the guys that he was in Vietnam with at that point. We had the film under another name called Dark Visions.
Right.
When I look back at it, it wasn't even really complete, but we were trying to get the story out there. And we came across this company. And they got us on iTunes. And a couple months into it, when we're starting to find out how much are we selling and this and that, they're not answering the phone. Turns out, next thing I know, they're in the Hollywood Reporter, Variety. They have robbed a bunch of filmmakers, including us. I guess their company was not set up correctly. They didn't know what the fuck they were doing. And they had all these people after them. And everybody, it became a cautionary tale in the business not to get involved with these aggregators flying by the seat of their pants or whatever. We couldn't track them down. And it was going to cost too much money with a lawyer to do all the bullshit to find them. And we said, you know what? It was early on. They hadn't had our film that long. We were able to call up iTunes, get our film taken off. We took it, chalked it up as a loss and says, you know what? Let's go back to the drawing board and make this film even better. Because by that time, I had really known, got to realize I was friends with Dominic until the day he died, probably almost 20 years from the inception of the day I met him. He lived with me for about 2.5, 3 years when we made the film. But then we kept making the film for literally another 10 years. We would go out to where he was. We would go out to meet guys that, from Vietnam. We'd fly there. We met an ex-girlfriend, Susie Cream Cheese, out in Vegas. We started to uncover his life because he more and more would be unfolding it, because it went from like this arrangement and this thing that we were doing as an artist, as a filmmaker, to like friendship, real friendship. And then it became, like I said, more like a mission to like clear his name and really get the truth out there. Because the other truth, which we haven't gotten into yet, was about being a rat and all that. He got, he felt he got cornered into a fucking hole by some decisions he made, some decisions Nino made. He ended up trapped. And that was another thing, like other guys, they don't want to do it, but they end up with no fucking choice. So that was like, there was all this stuff that became the catalyst for me to be like, well, I guess I'm the champion of this story and I got to get it out there. So that's what happened. Yeah, we ran into some problems. It actually became a blessing because we get to make the film better and better and better until finally we met Xenon Films and now we're releasing it.
Yeah, and I'm glad you did, man. Because like I said, I really enjoyed it. And I get DominickMontiglio.org. That's the best way to find it. And you'll go to Vimeo. You can get the link from there. Is that correct?
For now, that's the best way. We're working, the company Xenon is working on platforms, streaming platforms. But what happened was, and I can pump this, I can't tell you who's producing it, but a very big producer did an 8-part podcast that's going to come out in the first quarter of next year. It's Dom's last living interview. I'm in it. Some different people that are in my movie are in it. And it's a very interesting perspective about Dominick's life and so on. So we wanted to make sure our film came out before that podcast so people would have a place to go and see our film. So we figured we'd do it this way. So for now, yes, Vimeo is the best way to go rent it or buy it.
Great, thank you. Okay. So anyone watching this, if you don't know about the DeMeo crew, I'm sure if you clicked on this, you probably do. You can read Murder Machine. If you want to take it to the next level, you can go through the FBI files of Roy DeMeo, which are available. We're talking about, I mean, one of the most vicious crews ever, in La Cosa Nostra. Not only were they doing hits that they were supposed to do for the family, but obviously they were doing numerous things that went under the radar. They went even as far as killing a made man at one point without permission. Joe Bikini, that would be. So if you don't mind, I'm going to roll off some characters, some names. And if you can, maybe tell me something that maybe Dom told you about one of these characters, something that comes to mind real quick. Yeah. So I'll start off, kind of at the top. I mean, so we'll start out with the boss of all bosses, Mr. Paul Castellano. Is there anything that he would say about Paul?
I mean, Dom did go to Paul's house quite often because he would make drops for Nino when he was collecting money from Roy and the crew. So he had a relationship with Paul to a certain extent. In fact, I don't know if it was Paul's daughter, but there was something going on at some point where Nino and Paul, they were trying to get Dominic involved with one of the Castellano girls.
Okay.
His daughter. I don't want to speak out of line, not knowing the exact facts, but yeah, like Paul liked Dominic a lot, because Dominic, again, he carried some serious weight being a war hero. They all knew he went to Vietnam and they all respected that, even though Nino broke his balls and said, like, you're supposed to die for your family, not for the country. But deep inside, everybody had a respect for what he had done. So I think Paul really respected that. I know for a fact that, and Sammy's talked about this, but everybody that knew Paul was banging his housekeeper and shit. Right. It was a big no-no. Everybody had a problem with it. It was looked down upon. Dom mentioned that. Nino, everybody was like, what's this guy doing? It was a disgraceful thing. And then Paul had some fake did you know he had like a fake pump cock or something like
Yeah, I heard something about that from listening to Sammy. He had like a penis pump or some shit like
that?
that.
Yeah, like he had some type of thing where he had to like pump his cock up to make it work. And they used to crack on that, you know? They
Wow.
would talk about that and whatever. So
Yeah.
Dom told me some funny stories about things people would say about, you know, Big Paul. He said he was he was a businessman.
Yeah.
I'm saying he's like, he's a businessman. He wasn't a gangster's gangster.
Well, it's good he didn't date one of the daughters, right?
No.
Oh, good. Yeah, because one of them I know got chopped up by Roy, so maybe that's not the best idea.
There you go.
So how about Uncle Nino Gaggi?
Scary fucking guy. Scary guy. I mean,
Before you go, honestly, my view of him, scary, like psychopathic almost, like a diabolical guy. That's kind of
100%. So yeah. I mean, starting from when Dom was a kid, Dom would tell me stories where Nino would terrorize Dom in the house. Like Dom would be like 8 years old and Nino would like put fucking toothpicks in his face, turn out all the lights, and like go around the house and like look for Dom and then scare Dom with a flashlight with the fucking fangs and
Nosferatu or something. Yeah.
Yeah, like he'd do weird shit, right? And Nino, it's very Shakespearean what Nino did. Nino groomed Dom to be his heir apparent to his evil throne. Nino had it in his mind that Dom was going to be his minion. Nino had kids, kept them away from the life. But Nino's father, I mean, Dominick's father, who was supposed to be around, Nino tried to get him involved in an insurance scam, and the father didn't want to have nothing to do with it. And that's a long story. I won't get into the whole thing, but to make it shorter, Nino basically told his old man, who was also a drinker, Dom's dad, don't come around the family or we're going to kill you. And he kind of took him under his wing to raise him to be like his kid. And especially when Dom was like, came back from the war and was very impressionable, you know, and was trying to start a family and stuff and really didn't know what the fuck he was going to do. That's when Nino kind of swooped in and gave him a way to make a living, so on and so forth. But started to groom him, started to use him. Nino was very manipulative, very powerful. You know, he was a no joke. He was a gangster's gangster. He was a killer. Yeah. He did his own work. He didn't just send this guy to go do it or that guy to go do it. He would do this shit too.
Yeah.
So in that way, Nino was like the real deal. He was the real deal. Yeah.
And Roy DeMeo. Besides what we know, I mean, did Dominic speak candidly?
I would say you're just another very dangerous, insecure guy, right? Like needed to prove himself, needed to like outkill the fuck out of anything, right? You know, like Dom puts it, like Roy was just like a bloodthirsty motherfucker.
Yeah.
You know, he wanted to kill people. He wanted to enforce his power onto whatever scenario he was in, and if shit wasn't going his way, he'd just kill you. And then he had this crew of kids that he was rearing, and he created this crew of killers, you know. But he was like the head psycho, and Roy had been a butcher, so he taught them how to use knives. He taught them how to take bodies apart. But he was bloodthirsty. Roy was a bloodthirsty dude, from what Dominic said.
So when did Dom meet Roy? Was it in the mid 60s when he met Gaggi, around 66, 67, something like that? Or would have been later?
So Dominic, it would have been a few years after Dom gets home from the war and is working and starting to drive for Nino that he gets introduced to Roy, because Nino basically says, this is my nephew. He's going to be driving for me. He's going to be around. Dom used to say Nino would go down to Florida and spend time down there, and then Dom would be like the liaison between, you know, Roy and Nino, and he'd bring money to Paul and stuff from Roy's earnings and things. So Roy respected Dominic because he had to. Roy respected Dominic because he had to.
Yeah.
But Roy was dangerous too. I mean, they were all dangerous, but Roy was dangerous.
Of course.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, because you know, there's like, they say Roy met Nino in like 66, right? So, and then his documented first murder is 1973, and there's like 7 years between there where, you know, we don't know, you know, I'm sure Dominic might have knew what, that's my opinion. That's probably not his first murder. I mean, he was probably doing a lot before that. I don't know.
I don't know, but I know he was extorting people.
Yeah.
They talk about Dom talked about Kuklinski, right?
Oh yeah, God.
Now that lying motherfucker.
Yeah, people still believe that stupid fuck,
Right, but Dom was like, Roy had him fucking scared shit.
Yeah.
Roy had him paying him to do the porn shit.
Yeah.
And that was Roy. Roy was extorting him, and Roy had that thing going on. Roy was extorting, he was loan sharking, he had all that stuff going on.
Yeah.
So I think like once he really hooked up with Nino and saw a path to get made and a path to really be legit in the crime world, that's when he just started going hard.
Yeah. So then we have we got the crew. We got Harvey Rosenberg, Joey Testa, Anthony Center, Henry Borelli. We got those guys.
So let's start with Harvey Rosenberg. Dom hated him.
Okay.
And Chris hated Dom. Right? Like Dom saw his bullshit. Dom knew that because Harvey Rosenberg was a Jew who wanted to be an Italian. Right? And he wanted to run with these guys. And he used to tell Dom, I'll be the first made non-Italian in the history, because he was going to be the most ruthless, and he was like under Roy's wing. He was like Roy's kid, and that's why he started running around calling himself Chris DeMeo.
Yeah.
Instead of Chris Rosenberg or Harvey Rosenberg, he got Chris because he wanted to sound more Catholic Italian, and then he took on DeMeo because he was like Roy's boy. But Dom's like, Chris would have fucking tried to kill me 10 times over if Roy didn't put him in check and say, we can't touch Dom because he's Nino's nephew. The two are just oil and water. He didn't trust him, and Chris was a loose cannon. And I mean, Chris, got himself killed because he was such a wannabe. Had to be putting his name out as a DeMeo. You know the story of what Chris did and the whole thing. So, Chris was just, Dom did not like him. Not at all.
Oh, it's like, Roy insecure, just basically taking on another insecure teenager, basically, and just forming him into a, killer.
Yeah.
And, Joey Testa, Anthony Center, the Gemini twins.
So those guys, it's funny. I had gotten my hands on a tape of those guys at a picnic. We called it the Mayo picnic. And
is that your tape?
Yeah, well, the tape's out there in the ethos. I had gotten the actual tape, and we have an extended version where
oh man,
Freddie like laughing with this crazy laugh, cackle, and fucking filming them, and you got like Anthony Center and Henry Barrett, and they're all like making. No, I think it was Henry that was doing like all these like goofy jokes, and you got Joey Testa smoking cigarettes and goofing around. They're all just chilling at Roy's house by the water, and they're having a good time. Whatever. You could see they were tight. They had like a real funny friendship going on. They were just goofing with each other.
And Freddie's filming that. Am I correct?
Freddie's filming it.
Yeah.
Freddie's filming. Roy's going, turn off the camera, Freddie.
I'll shoot you.
And he's like laughing, or there's a spot where he just leaves it set up. But you could tell those guys were tight. They were really they had a, they were like feeding on. Dom, you say they just fed off of each other. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
One would do one thing and the other, and they kind of like, like any group of guys feeds off each other. Say you got a group of baseball players, they're all trying to be better.
Yeah.
And they're all working out together. These guys is the same thing, except they were a hit squad.
Yeah.
They were just trying to be better at taking people out and killing people and making money and the car ring and all that. So Anthony and Joey, Dom always just said like those guys had their own thing, man. They were legitimate killers, legitimate gangsters. They were smart, and they were like movers and shakers in their own right. He was with them, but he didn't have he wasn't really tight with those guys. Henry Borelli, however, he described as being like that was like one of my boys. Like he ran with Henry. Him and Henry hung out together. They had a much tighter friendship. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. And that video, I mean, I always assumed it was filmed sometime between 80 and 83. Is that correct? So in that time frame there?
Historically, I don't know exactly the time frame,
Okay. Okay.
but you probably.
Um, yeah. So I'm not going to ask you to discuss. I know we spoke on the phone. There's things that you're going to come out at some point. You know, I know Dom told you a lot of things that you couldn't talk about. You know, rest in peace, Dom, of course.
Hey, before you go there, let me finish up, Brett, with the crew, because the
Oh,
other
okay, I'm
guy that
sorry.
he told me about, which was funny, was fucking Vito Arena.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Now, what he told me about Vito is he had a crazy boyfriend. Vito was gay,
Yep.
a big gay guy who was a killer, and he had a little gay guy named Joey Lee, which was his boyfriend, who was also a killer.
Wow.
And these two used to do fucking sick shit together. And Dom was like, they just kind of dealt with it because Vito was like, you know, he did work, man, and he was part of the crew. But like Vito was another like twisted kind of entity.
Yeah.
And you had Joey Dracula, who was
Yeah,
part of the
yeah.
crew.
Of course.
You know,
Pete LaFrascia, he's on YouTube now. Peter LaFrascia.
Yep. So there was like, there was like a bunch of like guys, but then there was like an inner core, which is like what you're talking about, Chris, Anthony Center, Joey Testa, those guys.
Right.
So, but yeah, all in all, he just said, he said, when you went around the Gemini Lounge, if they hadn't killed somebody or done something like that, they'd be depressed and kind of miserable and moping. He goes, but if they were like doing shit or had bodies in the back or had just gotten done with something, they were all fucking jacked up and feeling good and you know, high and shit. And I always found it fascinating. How did that manifest? And he just said, you know, it was just circumstance where all these guys are living in the same neighborhood. They had the right figure at the right moment, and it was just like a fucking tornado.
It's wild, man. Yeah. It's definitely interesting. And something I always say is like, you know, we got things about there about this crew, but there's so much shit that we don't know still. There's definitely a lot of stuff out there that we don't know. And I'm looking forward, you know, whether it be you or anyone, I'm looking forward to anyone coming forward and speaking more about it. You know, guys like you who've spoke to Dom, whether Pete LaFrascia's on YouTube now talking, and I know there's still a lot to know. And I still consider it a largely unreported thing, you know.
Okay. Well, you know, I got to hand it to those guys on a certain level. They kept their mouths shut this whole time. Nobody.
I know, man. Yeah.
Nobody will, I guarantee it.
Yeah.
They're like, fuck that. I'm not saying fuck you.
Take it to the grave.
They're taking it to the grave. And, you know, you got to kind of tip your hat and go, yeah, I get it. You know,
yeah.
Like,
right.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, like, I heard stories from Dom, which, like I told you, there's certain things that I don't feel like I can repeat at this point in time.
Yeah.
But mobsters, let's put it to you like this, right? Mobsters, when you hear about like Sammy talking about it, some of these guys, they always say, you know, we didn't kill fucking random civilians, right? We're killing each other. And Dom said that a lot too. Like mostly it stood in that circle, but with those guys, it was different.
Totally different.
Guys ways, they'll fucking kill you, civilian, not a civilian, whatever. And I think shit happened with them, to your point, that nobody knows about, that a civilian got in the way of the wrong dude at the wrong moment and ended up dead.
Of course. You know, like Dom says, you know, I guess somebody called Roy a prick or something in a bar, like a younger kind of kid or something. He brings him in the car, kills him. You got the story of two guys in the bathtub. They're not staying for dinner, you know, stuff like that. I mean, we don't know who those guys are. You know, they're not documented. So, but of the documented hits that they did, was there anyone that Dom spoke candidly about, or is there anyone in particular that bothered him very much?
I don't, you know, what I think Dom spoke more about was, you know, so the DeMeo crew had this system set up, right? Like one of the brother-in-laws of one of them, forget which one, had the carting company, right? So they had a way of disposing of bodies that was built in. So imagine, you know, I'm not gonna say you could definitely get away with murder, but 95%, 99% chance you get somebody in the back room of this place and nobody knows it, they're disappearing easily.
Yeah.
putting them in a box in pieces. They're going into a dump. They really had that mechanism down so well. So for Dom, when he would see bodies chopped up or hanging up or whatever it was, and he knew their methodology, like they called it, I think in the book, the Gemini method.
Right.
Guy would be led down a hall. You get shot in the head, a towel around your head. You get stabbed in the heart. All this crazy shit these guys did and they talked about. I think that made Dom ultimately uncomfortable. You know, going around that crew, there was times where he said, "Man, I'll be honest with you, Rossi, I didn't know if I was making it out of there. I didn't know if my ticket might have come up, if I had friction with one of them, if whatever, you know, they were so capable of stepping outside of the fucking lines anyway. He just didn't know. So they were edgy, man. It was a different vibe. He didn't feel, I don't think he felt like at ease, you know. Now,
Yeah.
let me also say, don't get it twisted or anybody. Dom's not a victim here. Dom made the decision to be who he was. Dom ran with these cats. Dom did his shit too. Dom was sniffing fucking blow and getting lit and doing what he did too. Dom did violence. Dom was not a choir boy here.
Yeah.
And he never acted like, oh, I was the victim. He did try, as we both know, to go in a direction that just kept getting shut down, and he got like steered into the fucking dark side, which eventually he just said, fuck it, this is what I know. This is all I know. But once he was in it, he was in it, like with these guys. He wasn't like a pussy, like sitting in the corner, not participating in things.
Yeah. And to what you said, you know, I saw Sammy talking. He was mentioning that Dom came to him and he's like, Sammy, it's getting a little weird over there. He's like, I don't even want to go over there. And Sammy's like, I know. Just go there, do what you got to do, and just get out. Just, you know, so it's definitely, you know, he probably wasn't the only one feeling that at that time, that it was some really weird stuff going on over there. And I guess more, you know, a few people knew it at the time, I suppose.
Yeah, no, he knew they were psycho killers. They were like serial killers. There was shit that was just going on. It was out of bounds, man. It was just, you got in the path of these guys and they were going to kill this guy, but there were these people. I mean, everybody was going on the way. We know stories that happened. So yeah, they were out of control. But at the same time, Roy was earning, Nino was earning with them, money talks, and they were also so dangerous. Other crews were scared of them. And the Gambinos. So it was like the Gambinos had this crew of killers that it was like, what do we do with these guys? We can't get rid of them because they're working for us, but how do we contain them? And somehow Dom was like right in the mix of that.
Yeah, I don't know if a lot of people even know, you know, it took me a minute because, you know, I read through Roy DeMeo's FBI files and in Murder Machine. It doesn't really talk about his porn rackets. It doesn't go into a lot of stuff. But Roy was a multimillionaire. Like, he had millions of dollars. He was loaning out money all over freaking town. So, you know, I don't know how aware people are of that. So it's like a multi-millionaire serial killer running. I mean, it's really twisted, man.
Roy was no joke, man. Roy was a big earner. That's why Nino wouldn't have had him around if he wasn't making serious dough.
Crazy, man. Yeah. So, another question I have, you know, knowing some of this history from reading and all that stuff, you know, I've visited by the Gemini a couple of times, and I have to do something over there soon. And even though I'm not connected to it, just reading about it, it's kind of eerie, you know, when you know something happened somewhere, you go by, you get like a weird feeling. 4021 Flatlands Avenue, the Gemini Lounge. Did Dom ever go there while you guys were friends? Did he ever stop by there at all? Was just curiosity, memory lane, some...
Yeah, well, you know that it turned into a church afterwards for a while.
Yeah, it's a church again. Yeah.
We went, so when Dom was living with me, and okay, the documentary that you see, that whoever's watching this, they go to see, this is a documentary we put together where I'm talking about, you know, you're trying to edit fucking years of footage. So we're trying to edit it and tell a story in a certain way, linearly, and use imagery to back up stories and so on and so forth, right? That was the methodology. But we have tons of just talking stories, kind of like how these guys do, like on podcasts and whatnot, where they're telling, like how Sammy will just tell you a story. We got that with Dominic, and we also got, like, we went to the bunker with Dominic. We went to Cropsey Avenue. We went past the Gemini. We went around the neighborhood, 86th Street, where Vinnie Mook got shot. We did all that. So in our next documentary that we make, the follow-up to Lynchpin, we plan on really having a lot of that stuff fleshed out, where you could, like, you'll be in a van with me and Dom and Billy driving through Bensonhurst, going to 86th Street.
Okay.
He's talking about, this is where we ran up on Vinnie Mook. You know, Roy was parked over here. We were over there. Kind of like how you visit crime scenes.
Yeah.
We did that too. So yes.
Awesome. I can't wait to see that. Yeah.
We did visit. In fact, I'm the guy going, don't get out of the car. What the fuck are you doing? And Billy's chasing Dom out with the camera, and Dom's half lit going, come on, Ross, they don't worry about it. Nobody's going to have and you know, he's walking down 86th Street years later, fucking showing you where they shot him.
Yeah,
so,
man.
Yeah. So we did all that.
So,
yeah.
So if you can you talk about Dom's recurring dream?
Well, that dream that he talks about, where, like, you know, they're all under the car and telling him to come to hell and all that shit.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you know, Dom he had that recurring dream, and I think that Dom had two things that fucked him up. He had the PTSD from the war, and he would have dreams about Hill 875, and he'd have dreams about stuff like that. Then he'd have dreams about the crew. He'd have dreams about the Gemini Lounge, murders, bodies. And he had that reoccurring dream about them saying, like, come to hell with us, Dom. Because, you know, that's where Dom felt like he was headed. And in some respects, you know, like, no matter what, you got to realize, like, there was a connection with these guys, especially, like I say, like Henry. You know, Henry's doing life.
Yeah.
You don't walk away from being friends with a guy that ends up, he's doing life, and you end up maybe in the witness protection, whatever happened with Dom, and still not feel that guilt, not feel fucked up about it. Or Anthony Center and Joey doing their bids and not feeling like a fucking scumbag. He never felt good. He wasn't like, you know, he didn't feel good about that shit.
Yeah.
It's just like collateral damage, I guess, is how he looked at it. But he was haunted by it. He was haunted by it because, you know, being a soldier, it's about honor. He was a real soldier in a war with honor. He would have loved for that to transpire through being a gangster, and he didn't. So he was in this dishonorable light for many years of his life, and it just fucked with him. And I think that's what that dream was like. They're all in hell, whether they're dead or doing life.
Yeah.
And he felt like survivor guilt of that too. Like, come to hell with us, Dom. You know, and he would tell him, fucking hell.
And that's like them, like, and I guess in the driveway, they're under the car, and they're like, that's kind of what that is, right?
Yeah. They're like under a car and like a Cadillac or something, and he's walking by, and they're like, all like, come to hell with us, Dom.
Yes. Man, I wouldn't want to live with that, man.
Yeah. No, and you know, it sucked.
Whew. So I guess getting towards the end here, but if you can, Ross, if there was one lesson that Dominic taught you, something that you carry with you till this day, maybe even something that you might pass on to a child or a close friend, something that you carry with that maybe you'll always remember, and you know, how do you think you'll honor Dom going forward for the rest of your life?
Well, I think I honor Dom now by making myself available to tell his story.
Yeah.
Both in the form of the film and doing these type of interviews. Relating the fact of, like, some of what Dom taught me was about friendship, because as ironic as this may seem, because he did flip on friends because of his circumstance with his uncle, to me, Dom was a great friend, because think about it. I mean, what he gave me in return for what I gave him was the ability to tell this story, to be a filmmaker, to to be in a position to, you know, honor his life, which was a fucking pretty hardcore, amazing mix of shit that he was involved in, right? You know, this is a guy that always picked up the phone when you needed to talk. You wanted to, you know, like he was all over the place for years. He only lived with me a little bit of time, and then, you know, I'd call him here and there. He called me a lot more than I called him.
Okay.
You know, and he was there for you. He was a friend's friend. Like he was just there for you, man. Even if he just, you know, you were sitting in fucking traffic and you called him up and just start bullshitting about anything.
Yeah.
You just bullshit, you know, it could be about a gun he bought and he was testing it out in the desert somewhere, or, you know, fucking a Yankee game he saw, where it was just a guy's guy. Like, you know, it was just like just good people. No matter what people say, Dom was like, he was just good people. And when you see the second part, right? Like, for example, I know I'm kind of getting off the topic of maybe the question, but Dom created this alter ego called Harry Knight. And he did this thing called Harry Knight in the Night Show, where he'd be like, this is Harry Knight with the Night Show. And he'd be like, tonight on the Night Show, we're going to interview. And he would create these fucking characters. He'd be drinking and stuff like that. And he was a fucking goofball. Like, and he was a killer, but he was a goofball. And he was funny as fuck. And he was creative. He did poetry. He did spoken word stuff, right? He would be like, Ross, film me. I just did this spoken word thing called The Streets of Brooklyn, which you could look up. It's out there. Streets of Brooklyn. He does this whole poem. Very vivid. Like, the guy just was so multifaceted. He was a fascinating guy, you know? And what he showed me was, you got to be resilient in this life. You know, you're gonna suffer the consequences of your actions. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's another thing he taught me, like, you know, you want to play the game, you're gonna pay. Dom used to say to me, Ross, the interesting thing about war and being a gangster is the ante you put up is your life. In war, if you lose in our game, you die. And it's the same thing as a gangster. In that game, you either die or you go to jail for the rest of your life. That's what you're playing with. So when you're putting those chips up, man, you know, you got to be prepared for what the back end might be. And to that point, like fucking Nino, I always say that. I've said this when people ask me, right? Nino played himself because Nino thought he could control Dom. One of the most uncontrollable motherfuckers you'll ever come across is Dom. Because as much as he'll like acquiesce to what you know, at the end of the day, he's going to do it his way. And he did that as a gangster. Even because he wasn't made, he still had a crew. Even if he wasn't supposed to sell drugs, he sold drugs. Even if you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
No matter what, he was going to do his shit his way. And that's why Nino wanted to take him out at a certain point, because he knew too much. He was uncontrollable. And Nino didn't know what the fuck he was going to do once he got pinched, you know, collecting money from that Winnick thing. So, you know, that was a cautionary tale. Like, don't fucking do shit unless you're willing to pay that price, man. Don't, you know, you can't half-ass that shit.
Yeah.
And I think that's, you know, and he taught me about bravery, man, because also, like, again, like I said, like, you know, he says it in the film. He goes, how many chances you got to go to war and be a warrior? Now, his head said, I want to go see what that shit's about. And he went and did that.
Yeah.
Not like these fake motherfuckers who think they're tough guys, but ain't about it. Dom was about it, right? Dom was about it. You know, he was a legitimate tough guy. You know, you're not backing Dominic down. I don't care how many guys you got. He's going, right? He's gonna fight 1 or 5, or he's there for the back. He was a real warrior, man, and he separated the soft bullshit from the real shit. I've seen shit in the streets. I've done some stuff in the streets that, you know, I've seen people. I know characters. Dom was like, he was legit, man.
Yeah, man.
Hard. He showed me what it meant to really be about it.
All right, Ross. I mean, I want to thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak to you. And I want to thank you for bringing Dom's story out as well, and for continuing to do so. I know you mentioned you have some stuff in the works for the future, and obviously there's always going to be haters, but more people than not want to know more about Dom. Believe me, more people want to know more about what you know, and we definitely look forward to what you have in the works for the future. Um, can you just remind people again where they can watch this film, please?
Yeah, Brett, thank you. First of all, thank you for having me. Thank you for promoting his story. Um, Again, you can attest to the uniqueness of what that Lynchpin of Bensonhurst is. It's unlike any mob doc there is, because you got a guy that was living with a friend in an art studio, right?
Yeah,
It's not like a journalist comes and interviews a gangster. This was something different. Billy and I both interviewed Dominic for years and years. It was very intimate. So thank you for that. You could see the film on Vimeo. You could find the link at DominickMontiglio.org. Definitely stay tuned for the 8-part series that's going to come out in the first part of next year. It's Dom's last living interview. And there's a lot of guys, detectives are in it, FBI, DEA, all kinds of agents are in it. Old friends of his are in it. I'm in it. It's a hell of a piece. His daughter's in it.
wow.
And definitely, you could see, I'm glad you mentioned that. Man, there's a lot of haters out there. And I guess the internet breeds these armchair warriors that sit there and just talk all this shit and don't know about it. My answer to all of them is, in this documentary, you get the answers. It's there. If you don't believe it, it's backed up by people that were with him that can attest to it.
Yep.
And I guarantee you, Brett, part 2, when that comes out, whole nother side of Dominic. And also the story of like 2 guys, like, an artist, like I said, who grew up in Great Neck, Long Island, Queens, living with this guy, suddenly living with a gangster. That's a whole story unto itself, which is kind of interesting too.
It's wild, man. It really is. And I know you said, I watched Bobby Luisi's interview with you. You said you don't follow religion, but I think you're doing God's work, bro. You're doing awesome, man.
I appreciate it.
And I really appreciate everything you've been doing. And I appreciate you joining me too, man.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Brett.
Thank you, Ross.
Good talking to you, all right?
All right. All right.
Cheers.
Tonight we love.